The Wailing House. The following account was discovered among the personal effects of Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a renowned paranormal investigator who vanished without a trace in October 2023. Her final case files, along with this handwritten narrative, were found, sealed in a lead-lined box buried beneath her former home. The house she investigated, 1847 Blackwood Lane, was demolished 3 days after her disappearance. City records show no official reason for the demolition. What you're about to read is her final testimony. The investigation. The call came on a Tuesday evening, rain drumming against my office windows like skeletal fingers. Margaret Whitmore's voice trembled through the phone line, barely audible above the static that seemed to follow her everywhere these days. Dr. Mitchell, please, something's wrong with our house. It's been 3 weeks since we moved in, and... She paused, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. It wants our daughter. I'd heard similar pleas countless times before. New homeowners, old houses, unexplained phenomena, usually nothing more than settling foundations and overactive imaginations. But something in Margaret's voice, a quality I couldn't quite place, made me set down my pen and listen. Tell me what's happening, Mrs. Whitmore. The crying starts at 3:17 a.m. every night. Lucy says she hears a woman calling her name, asking her to come downstairs. Last night, her voice broke. Last night we found Lucy's bedroom door wide open. She was standing at the top of the stairs in her nightgown, completely asleep, but her eyes were open. When we called her name, she turned to us and said, "She's waiting for me in the basement. She's been waiting so long." The hairs on my arms stood on end. In 20 years of paranormal investigation, I'd learned to distinguish between fabricated stories and genuine encounters. This felt genuine. "I'll be there tomorrow," I told her. 1847 Blackwood Lane squatted like a wounded animal against the grey October sky. The Victorian house had been beautiful once, ornate trim work, wrap-around porch, tall windows that would have welcomed morning light. Now it seemed to absorb illumination rather than reflect it, creating shadows where none should exist. Margaret Whitmore met me at the door, her appearance shocking. In 3 weeks, she'd aged years. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, and her hands shook as she led me inside. The interior of the house felt wrong. Not just old or neglected, actively malevolent. The temperature dropped noticeably as we moved deeper inside, and I noticed scorch marks around several electrical outlets, though the Whitmores insisted they'd never had any electrical problems. "It's gotten worse since I called you." The interior of the house felt wrong. Not just old or neglected, actively malevolent. The temperature dropped noticeably as we moved deeper inside, and I noticed scorch marks around several electrical outlets, though the Whitmores insisted they'd never had any electrical problems. "Where's Lucy now?" I asked, setting up my equipment in the living room. "School. Tom took her to stay with his sister tonight. I didn't want her here while you..." She gestured helplessly at my EMF detectors and thermal cameras. Smart decision. I'd learned early in my career never to conduct investigations with children present. Whatever lived in houses like this often fed on innocence. As evening approached, I began documenting baseline readings. The electromagnetic field fluctuated wildly throughout the house, strongest near the basement door. My thermal camera showed cold spots that moved independently of any air currents, but it was the audio that truly unsettled me. At 3:17 a.m., exactly as Margaret had described, the crying began. It started as a whisper, a woman's voice, distant and mournful, calling out in words I couldn't quite understand. My recording equipment captured it clearly, but the sound seemed to bypass my ears entirely, resonating somewhere deeper in the marrow of my bones. "Lucy, Lucy, my sweet child, come to me." The voice grew stronger, more insistent. The basement door, which I had locked and bolted shut, began to rattle in its frame. The temperature in the living room plummeted from 68 degrees to 43 in less than 30 seconds. I followed protocol, speaking calmly into my recorder. 3:17 a.m., October 15th. Audio anomaly confirmed. Temperature drop of 25 degrees. Physical manifestation affecting basement door mechanism. But protocol couldn't prepare me for what happened next. The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of footsteps ascending the basement stairs. Slow, deliberate steps that creaked on wood that, according to the house's renovation records, had been replaced with concrete in 1987. The basement door swung open. I've investigated over 200 supposedly haunted locations. I've seen objects move, heard voices, felt the oppressive weight of unwelcome presences, but I'd never seen a full-body apparition. Until that moment. She stood in the doorway, translucent but undeniably real. A woman in a tattered white nightgown, her dark hair hanging in wet tendrils around a face that was both beautiful and terrible. Her eyes were the worst part, completely black like pools of oil, and they fixed on me with an intelligence that was wholly malevolent. "Where is she?" the apparition asked, her voice like wind through broken glass. "Where is my daughter?" I understood then. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a hunt. The entity believed Lucy was her child, and it wouldn't stop. "She's not here," I managed to say, fighting every instinct to run. The temperature dropped further, ice began forming on the windows, and my breath came out in white puffs. The apparition moved closer, and I realized her feet weren't touching the ground. "You're lying," she hissed. "I can smell her sweetness, her innocence. She belongs with me, in the dark below, where it's safe, where it's always safe." My equipment began malfunctioning. The EMF detector's needle spun wildly before the device sparked and went dead. The thermal camera's screen flickered with static, then displayed impossible readings, temperature signatures that showed the entire house as a seething mass of cold spots. But it was my audio recorder that captured the most disturbing evidence. Playing back the recording later, I discovered that while the entity spoke to me, another voice, young, frightened, could be heard in the background. "Mummy, help me. She won't let me go. She says I have to stay in the dark forever." The voice was Lucy's, though Lucy was miles away, safe with her aunt. The apparition's attention snapped to my recorder, and her expression changed from anger to triumph. "She calls to me," she whispered. "Even now, she calls. The connection is made. Distance means nothing now." She began to fade, but her final words echoed through the house with supernatural clarity. "Tell the mother. Tell her the choice is simple. Give me the child, or I will take her. 3 days. When the moon is dark, I will come for what is mine." The basement door slammed shut with such force that it cracked the frame. The oppressive presence lifted, leaving behind only the lingering smell of earth and decay. I packed my equipment with shaking hands and drove straight to Tom Whitmore's sister's house. I found the family huddled in the living room, all of them pale and frightened. "She was here," Margaret whispered when she saw me. "Somehow she was here. Lucy started screaming at 3:17, saying a woman was calling her name, trying to pull her into the walls." Lucy sat curled in her father's lap, staring at nothing. When I approached, she looked up with eyes that held far too much knowledge for a 7-year-old. "The lady says she's my real mummy," Lucy said in a voice barely above a whisper. She says my other mummy stole me from the dark place. She's going to take me home soon. I spent the next 2 days researching the history of 1847 Blackwood Lane. What I found chilled me more than any paranormal encounter. In 1923, a woman named Elizabeth Crane had lived in the house with her 7-year-old daughter Sarah. Elizabeth suffered from what would now be recognized as severe postpartum psychosis. One October night, Elizabeth convinced herself that the only way to keep Sarah safe was to take her below, where the bad people can't find us. She led the child into the basement and sealed them both inside a hidden room behind the foundation wall. They were found 3 weeks later, both dead from starvation. Elizabeth's arms were still wrapped around Sarah's body. The child's fingernails were worn to the bone from trying to claw her way out. The house had been abandoned for decades before the Whitmores bought it. The basement had been renovated multiple times, but contractors consistently reported strange accidents and unexplained phenomena. 2 workers had died over the years, both found at the bottom of the basement stairs with no apparent cause of death. On the 3rd night, the night of the new moon, I returned to Blackwood Lane against every instinct of self-preservation. I couldn't let the entity claim Lucy without a fight. The house was waiting for me. Even from the street, I could see lights flickering in the windows, though the electricity had been shut off. The front door stood open, invitation and threat combined. Inside, the air itself seemed alive with malevolent energy. Shadows moved independently of any light source, and the walls pulsed like a heartbeat. The temperature was so cold, my breath formed ice crystals that tinkled to the floor. I found her in the basement, standing before a section of wall that hadn't been there during my previous visit. The mortar looked fresh, the bricks dark with moisture. Elizabeth Crane turned to me with a smile that was pure madness. "She's coming," she said, her voice filled with maternal joy. "My daughter is coming home." The wall behind her began to crack, and through the fissures I heard it, Lucy's voice, calling for help, though Lucy was still miles away with her family. I understood then the true horror of what was happening. The entity wasn't just hunting Lucy, it was pulling her through space and time, dragging her consciousness into the same prison where it had trapped its own daughter nearly a century ago. "Let her go," I demanded, though my voice shook. "She's not your child." Elizabeth's black eyes fixed on me with inhuman fury. "They're all my children," she whispered. "Every innocent soul that enters this house belongs to me. I protect them. I keep them safe in the dark forever." The wall exploded outward, and what emerged was the stuff of nightmares. Not just Elizabeth's daughter, but dozens of children, ghostly, translucent figures with hollow eyes and reaching hands. Children who had died in the house over the decades. Children who had been drawn to it by Elizabeth's call. Children who had been trapped in her twisted idea of eternal safety. They moved toward me as one, their voices joining in a chorus of the damned. "Help us, help us, help us." Behind them, I saw her, Lucy, unconscious and floating in the air, being pulled inexorably toward the dark space behind the wall. Elizabeth's arms were already reaching for her, ready to add another child to her collection. I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my phone and called Margaret Whitmore. "Wake up, Lucy!" I shouted when she answered. "Wake her up now and get her out of the house. Don't ask questions, just do it." The connection broke, but I'd bought precious seconds. Elizabeth's hold on Lucy wavered as the child's consciousness was pulled back to her physical body. The other ghost children pressed closer, and I finally understood what they were trying to tell me. The only way to stop Elizabeth was to join them, to become another guardian spirit, another protector, keeping her from claiming more innocence. As I write this final entry, I can feel her presence growing stronger. The wall is rebuilding itself, sealing me in with the others. But Lucy is safe. The connection is broken. If you're reading this, it means someone found my notes. Whatever you do, don't come looking for me. Don't try to investigate 1847 Blackwood Lane. Some doors should never be opened. Some truths are too terrible to uncover. And sometimes, the only way to stop a monster is to become one yourself. The children are calling to me now. It's time to join them in the dark. Time to stand guard forever. And that concludes our journey into the Wailing House. But some stories never truly end, do they? The empty lot on Blackwood Lane still stands, and locals say if you listen carefully on October nights, you can still hear her calling. If this story sent chills down your spine, smash that like button and let me know in the comments, have you ever experienced something unexplainable in your own home? Your story could be featured in our next video. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we dive deep into the world's most terrifying true stories and urban legends every week. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.